All right, we are back in the car. It is a chilly, but not too chilly, might get some snow, Friday evening here in New York. It is February 6th, 2026. And today is a boxing anniversary. It is a Muhammad Ali boxing anniversary. And when you take the kind of prime of Ali, which has been much debated and is kind of fabled in its way, but it's not exaggerated by as much as you might expect or you might think if you were to actually go back and watch the fights from when he was at his peak, which most people would agree is basically 1966 and 67. But specifically, if you have to say what was his best year, you would say 66. And if you are further asked the question, which fight allowed him to show the widest range of skills when he was at his physical peak, you would say the Cleveland Williams fight in the Houston Astrodome in 1966. Ali fought twice, and only twice, in 1967 before his exile period. He had successfully defended the World Heavyweight Championship 7 times from when he won the title in 64, February 64, from the unbeatable, invincible Sonny Liston, and he defended the title 7 times across 1965 and 1966. And he was the lineal world heavyweight boxing champion, meaning he held the 2 main federations' belts, WBC and WBA. He won both of those belts when he defeated Sonny Liston, but he decided to give Sonny a return fight, and I don't really understand why the reigning champion losing would not automatically be able to get a return fight. But the World Boxing Association told Ali, you can't give Sonny a return fight. I think that the WBA thought the fight was fixed. Ironically, they thought the first fight was fixed. The second fight hadn't happened yet, and the second fight is the one that historically people think, many people think to this day, Joe Rogan, many people think there was something very fishy about the second fight. But Ali went ahead and he had the second fight, the return match with Sonny Liston in 1965, and that was his first title defense. But because he chose to defend his title in that fashion against Sonny, when the WBA said, don't do it or we're going to strip your title, Ali said basically, fuck you, I'm going to defend against who I want. I mean, Sonny earned a title challenge, a chance to get his title back, a return fight. He didn't really understand what all of the hullabaloo was about. He knew that first fight was legitimate. So the WBA stripped Ali of his title, and this is well before he ran afoul, Ali, that is, of the establishment with the Vietnam War. And I mean, that was in the pipeline, but he had yet to become controversial for his stance on Vietnam. That hadn't happened. He was already polarizing because he had changed his name from Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr. to Muhammad Ali, and he aligned himself with some people that, I mean, history isn't necessarily that kind to Elijah Muhammad. Malcolm X, yes. Elijah Muhammad, no. And in later years, Ali would say that if he could do it over again, he would have backed Malcolm X and not Elijah Muhammad. But that's really beside the point. It's neither here nor there. When Ali's title was stripped by the WBA, Ernie Terrell ended up winning a share of the crown, winning the WBA crown by outpointing a very strong fighter from the era who fought the best, named Eddie Macon. And as Ali was doing his thing, defending his title against the likes of Henry Cooper and Floyd Patterson and George Chuvalo and, of course, Carl Mildenberger and Cleveland Williams, I forgot Brian London was in there, Ernie Terrell defended the WBA portion of the World Heavyweight crown twice. He successfully defeated 2 people that Ali had already fought and beaten, one being Doug Jones and the other being the really tough, I mean, legendarily rugged George Chuvalo. George Chuvalo fought everybody. He fought the best in his era, and he was not knocked down ever by anybody. He was in there with George Foreman, and Foreman could not move him off his spot. If they hadn't stopped the fight, the joke is George might have collapsed from hitting him so much. But Chuvalo was a tremendous fighter, and Doug Jones, maybe a little undersized for a heavyweight, gave young Cassius Clay all he could handle at the Garden in '63. There were some people that thought that Doug actually did enough to outpoint Cassius Clay, but The kid got the decision, and that was a kind of a springboard to better things for him, and then he ended up the following year winning the World Heavyweight Championship. But unification matches, that's a big thing in boxing. We've seen it. We saw it with Ray Leonard. In 1981, Ray Leonard and Thomas Hearns, the first fight, a unification match, a fight of the century kind of thing with Ali and Frazier in 71. We saw De La Hoya versus Mayweather in 07. You think about the great kind of unification fights. But this was a little bit different because Ali was the people's champ, and he really was the lineal champ. He didn't lose the WBA belt in the ring, and that's something that came up when he made his return from exile and Joe Frazier had won the championship in the interim. The idea being, Ali, in the minds of certain people, and most people who were boxing fans, he didn't lose in the ring. It's like he's the lineal champion, even though he doesn't have the belts. The belts were stolen, literally and figuratively and symbolically. Every possible LLY word, the belts were stolen from him. His career was stolen from him, at least temporarily. But Ernie Terrell was a tough guy. He was a standout fighter. He was not an all-time great heavyweight champion, but he was a really good boxer. He was a big guy, and he had the kind of, if you look at pictures of him, he's somebody that if he had gotten into weight training, like if you took Ernie Terrell's skill sets and you put him into the 1990s, he's a top contender. I don't think he beats Evander Holyfield or beats Mike Tyson, but he would have been working out with weights, and I'm telling you, the guy was 220 and chiseled. He would have been 250, and at 240 to 250, he would have been a handful for anybody because he was a good stand-up fighter. He had good defense, and he was not afraid to brawl. He was a guy who could take a big shot, and he mixed it up, and he had a career record of 45-9, and he's not in the International Boxing Hall of Fame, the one that's upstate New York at Canastota, but that's a borderline candidate. If you ever wonder what would be an example of somebody that's not in the Hall of Fame, but many people argue should be, Ernie Terrell is a legitimate answer to that question. So the fight was made that the two champions were going to square off, and unlike other, Mike Tyson, Mike Spinks, that's it's funny, I forgot that. That's an example of a unification because Michael Spinks had won Larry Holmes's Larry Holmes's portion of the title. So technically Spinks, who had been a light heavyweight champ, he was a kind of co-owner of the belt, and it was a unification match against Tyson. Of course, nobody thought that Michael Spinks had any chance to beat Mike Tyson. They could have run that fight 1,000 times, and maybe the only way that Spinks wins if Tyson maybe breaks his leg or something stupid like that. There's no way that Spinks could ever beat Tyson. He just wasn't big enough. The problem, it's almost a humorous vein, is that Tyson was a better boxer. He did everything better than Michael Spinks anyway, and he was just a naturally much bigger guy. It was a terrible, awful matchup. Well, similarly, very few people thought that Ernie Terrell could beat Ali. The problem with Terrell is, for such a big guy, he was not known as a very hard puncher. Doesn't mean he couldn't hit. It doesn't mean he didn't know how to set himself up and leverage his shots. He did. But he was a guy who outboxed his opponents. His 45 wins in his career, he only had 21 knockouts. And hey, Muhammad Ali himself was not known as a tremendous hitter, but his knockout percentage, if you look at it that way, he had a pretty good knockout percentage, particularly in the 60s. He used to pick the round that he would knock out his opponents, or in many cases, the ref would just have to save them from humiliation or just getting beat up. But the only way that Ernie Terrell could beat Ali was realistically going to be outpoint him. And as Larry Merchant would say, good luck. Good luck. So the guys had known each other. They knew each other from when they were, I think they knew each other as far back as the amateurs. They were not unknown to one another, and they hadn't just met in passing. They were on friendly terms. Now, you realize when you're in boxing, there is always the likelihood, if you have two people who continue to ascend the ladder of success, eventually you're going to be on a collision course. As Ali and Frazier knew this from when they first met after Joe won the Olympic gold medal in Tokyo 1964 and came to visit the still very young heavyweight champ. Ali was only 22 himself at the time. And they knew that there was a chance they were going to end up fighting, but they're joking around. And Ali says, yeah, Joe, I know how you can become champ. Oh, what should I do? You got to lose weight and become a light heavyweight. A lot of jocularity, a lot of laughs with the guys. But Ali and Terrell had a good relationship. They were on friendly terms. They knew they could fight, but there was no animus between them. Another thing that we know and what people understand is that Ali was somebody who liked to work on his opponents' brains, on their minds. He liked to get into their heads and just mess with them. Sometimes it was for humorous effect, but other times he cut pretty deep. If it was something that had aggravated him, like some of the stuff that Floyd Patterson had talked about before they met in '65, saying stupid stuff like, I'm going to bring the title back to America. Bro, what are you talking about? You're both Americans. What, are you going to bring the title back where? What? Stuff like that drove Ali nuts. Ernie Terrell was not somebody who was a big talker. He let his fists do the talking. And he hadn't really lost in a number of years. I think the last fight he had lost was to, it may have been to Eddie Macon, and then he ended up defeating him. Or no, it was the Cleveland Williams fight. He had lost to Cleveland Williams and then, kind of gotten him by decision in the rematch. He wasn't a big talker, but for whatever reason, he insisted on referring to Muhammad Ali as Clay, his birth name. He kept calling him Clay. Now, to be fair, Muhammad Ali didn't always get upset when people called him Clay. There were a lot of announcers that referred to him as Clay. They didn't mean anything. They weren't trying to be assholes or anything like that in most instances. Very few people went the way of Howard Cosell, who, as soon as he changed his name, Howard Cosell started calling him Muhammad. That's how Howard was wired. He gave the man agency. He didn't fight against it. He didn't pretend that this is a phase. No, he called him Muhammad. I don't know if Ernie Terrell was trying to get some kind of psychological edge, but he just kept calling him Clay. He said, anyway, some of the time it wasn't saying anything terrible. He's just like, me and Clay, we're going to have a great fight. It's going to be a battle. Ali just, come on, Ernie, can you just, please, we're both men here. We're adults. We're going to go out there and we're both going to do our best. We're going to give the fans a show, but can you just call me my name, please? Hey, we met. We've known each other how many years? You called me, I called you Clay. You told me your name was Clay. I'm calling you Clay. And at first, I think Ali thought that the guy was just fucking with him, that he was just goofing on him, and then was just going to say, all right, let's go, Muhammad. Let's have a fight. He wouldn't move off of it. Ernie would not move off of it. Now, Ali's general game plan, he was not a risk-taking fighter. He was very careful for all of the clowning and running around the ring with his hands down and, making mistakes, quote unquote, that would have been deadly mistakes for almost any other fighter except him in the 1960s, because he was so fast. It was very difficult to land more than one punch at a time. Henry Cooper talked about that. He said you hit him once and then you're loading up again and he's not even close to where you're going to throw the punch. You better hold it in. And while you do that, he's going to rat-tat-tat you with the jab. He was usually extremely cautious. He didn't go out in the first round walking his opponent down. He didn't throw right-hand leads in that era because he knew that he was quick enough to get out of the way of the incoming fire. He didn't need to take any unnecessary risks, and nobody likes getting punched in the face. But there was something in the way that Ernie was indignantly insisting on calling him Clay. He scrapped his typically cautious game plan. He said, you know what? I don't want to do this, but now I got to really punish you, Ernie. We were just going to have a fight. We were just going to go out there and entertain the fans, and maybe we both get bruised up, and I was going to win anyway. But now you put me in a position. Now I got to hurt you. Now I got to punish you. Now I got to humiliate you. It didn't have to be this way. We could have just had a fight, but now you're going to pay. There are people who believe that Ali did not put forth full effort in this fight. Not that he didn't try to win. But there are people who believe that from about the 7th round onward, if he had leveraged his shots the way that he knew how to, he would have stopped Ernie. But that he didn't want to. That he wanted Ernie to go the full 15. That he wanted to humiliate the guy for 15 rounds. Just because he wouldn't say my fucking name. Come on, man. Come on, man. And at the end of the 8th round, Ali, with just barrage after barrage, the audio picks up something that he says as the bell is about to ring. He lands a barrage. Left, right, left. What's my name? What's my name? What's my name? And it's almost 60 years later, and that question, you still hear it echo. Just say my name. Come on, man. Terrell didn't do it. And so the fight was not a fight, it was a massacre. Two of the judges had it a 15-0 shutout. That is very rare. I think that this is almost stupid, when Larry Holmes beat Tex Cobb in the early 80s, speaking of Howard Cosell, that was the fight that convinced Howard Cosell to give up boxing. He said, this sport is atrocious. This was terrible. What did I just watch? I think Larry might have pitched a shutout against Tex Cobb. That wasn't that much of a surprise. But for one heavyweight champion to pitch a shutout against another heavyweight champion, that's something else. And Ali won all 15 rounds on 2 of the scorecards, and the third card, which I think was the referee, I think the ref gave Ernie a round. Yeah, maybe he did enough to get a round. There are certain all-time great fighters, and many of you, if you're fight fans, you know this. There are certain great fighters, like if I were to just ask you the question, which legendary names, just in your opinion, if somebody says, give me 3 guys who you think fought angry, or at least there was the appearance that they were fighting angry, that they were fighting in a rage, that they were, in a sense, fighting for their lunch money, kind of old school style. Give me 3 guys. The people who go back 100 plus years. The 3 names that I'm saying first: Jack Dempsey, Roberto Duran, Mike Tyson. Those are 3 guys who often had a look on their face as if they hated their opponents with a passion and wanted to literally kill them. Or in the words of Mike Tyson, I like to try to push the nose bone into the brain. Tyson had a lot of great quotes. Nobody wants to fight me because I bring the pain. This is the hurting business, baby. We're in the hurting business. There is very little of that in Ali's entire career. Maybe the first Patterson fight in '65, but then he and Floyd actually became friends. That whole thing shouldn't have happened the way that it did. Floyd said some stupid stuff. Ali said probably more stupid stuff. But the Terrell fight, to me, is the only time it looks like Ali is trying to really hurt his opponent. Hurt him physically, hurt him mentally, hurt him psychologically, hurt him spiritually. Like, you just, fuck this guy, I don't care. Because you can point to fights where he is waving for the referee to stop it. It's kind of ironic. You're in a sport where the goal is to separate your opponent from his senses and to open cuts. It's a brutal sport. But think about when Ali fought Quarry the second time and Jerry is just barely hanging on. He's stumbling and staggering into the ropes, and Ali is yelling at the ref, what are you doing? You got to stop this fight, man. I want to kill this guy. He didn't say that, but that was the implication. And even the Ron Lyle fight, when Lyle, who was ahead on points, Lyle got hit with about 50 unanswered punches, and he's just wobbling on the ropes, and Ali is looking at the ref like, bro, what are you doing? You got to stop this fight. There's no reason for this to continue. And even when he fought George Foreman, with everything on the line in '74, the big comeback, he lost a fight to Frazier, he lost a fight to Kenny Norton, he beat Norton, he beat Frazier, and he's out there with Foreman, and it's the 8th round, and he lands that series of punches, the left followed by the right, and George kind of stumbles and staggers and starts, almost stutter stepping around the ring. And we've seen fighters seem as if they're going to go down, but they don't actually go down. And in that moment, it looks like George might regain his balance. And if you look at Ali and that fight, October 30th, October 31st, I think it was October 30th, 1974. It looks like he's got his arm cocked. He's ready to deliver one more shot. He could probably crack George across the jaw as he's trying to get his balance. He goes to punch, and he does not throw the punch. And George goes down anyway. But after the fight, he's asked a legitimate question. Champ, you could have thrown that shot. You for sure would have ended the fight. Why didn't you throw that punch? And Ali, with a straight face, said, I thought George had enough. I thought that was it. We didn't need to throw any more punches. The fight, he'd had enough. That was his normal process in the brutal sport of boxing, in the gladiator type sport. Just 2 guys out there giving their all. The only time he did anything like that in the ring, where he was just angry and mean. One of the things, like Roy Jones Jr., when he was talking about, and obviously this is now infamous, that he thinks that the Sugar Ray Leonard of 1980-81 has the advantage against Floyd Mayweather. He said Floyd has no idea how mean Ray was. Mean. Ray, for all the smiling, that's a dog. You don't want any part of that guy. You don't want any part of that guy. The only fight where Ali was ever mean was the Ernie Terrell fight. 59 years ago today, man, February 6th, 1967. So it ended up being Ali's 8th successful title defense, and he only had one more fight. That would be against Zora Foley the following month, actually, only 6 weeks, at Madison Square Garden. I think that was March 22nd or 23rd, 1967. Sorry, I had a little bit of a software malfunction with the camera here and the microphone. So I was just saying, Ali had one more fight. He defeated Zora Foley, a brilliant performance. Foley was one of the best fighters of the era, a really crafty, fast, could hit hard, was very, very smooth in the ring. And that would bring to an end Ali's first title reign. He'd had 9 successful defenses, and really none of those fights were competitive. I guess the Mildenberger fight, because Carl landed a couple of good body punches. Ali, on top of everything else, he seemed to take liver shots better than any fighter who ever lived. I don't really even understand how that's possible. Speaking of, great fighters from more recent vintage, as Bernard Hopkins says, man, you get hit in the liver. Just the way Bernard Hopkins says, you get hit in the liver. He was talking about his famous liver punch knockout of Oscar De La Hoya now more than 2 decades ago. But really, the Mildenberger fight, I think Ali pitched a shutout in that fight too. He really didn't lose that many rounds in those 9 title defenses. And after the Foley fight, which was 6 weeks post unifying the title again against Ernie Terrell, that would put a capper on his career. And for 3.5 years, he was kind of in the wilderness and was very fortunate he didn't end up going to prison. But he was out of the sport and did not return until he was 28. And honestly, the magic was gone, but there was something else with him. He had some other level that really didn't make any sense. A will to win that just had people to this day still scratching their heads. Another thing Mike Tyson loves to talk about is that guy was just different. He was different. He was an animal in there. I don't really understand it. But on this day, 1967, Ali versus Ernie Terrell, in the Houston Astrodome, and really an extraordinary performance by a very angry, uncharacteristically spiteful Muhammad Ali. This has been episode 671 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for spending some of your Friday evening here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Until then, peace.